who would like to? Yanni?
Thank you. I know that this isn't an easy time for us as a council. There are a number of things in this draft plan that, are not going to please people in our community or in our city. But I do think the key thing is that we're putting this out there for public feedback, for public submission. And so I'm happy to support this going out to receive the public information and view in terms of what people think. Obviously, the major issue, the major cost associated to this financial plan is the loss of our consenting accreditation. That has had a huge financial impact on us as an organisation, and we've had to work hard and look wide around how we can actually pay for the cost of that issue. So this plan, I think, reflects that. This is a one-year annual plan. We will be going through a much more intensive long-term planning process over the next 12 months, and I think that's the opportunity for us to have some of those really big conversations. So I support this going out to public notification, of course, like all councillors. As we hear submissions and receive further information, we may change our minds on certain things that are in it, and I think that is healthy, that is part of local democracy, and that is really important that we do that as a council. So happy to support this going out for public consideration. Again, I do thank staff for the work that they've done in very difficult circumstances with an election and some major changes happening within our organisation. I do appreciate that you have worked really hard to try and look at how we can be financially prudent, and obviously, this draft plan reflects that, so thank you.
Okay. Jimmy Chen.
Thank you. Yeah, I also support this draft annual plan, because this draft annual plan, my personal view, they have some of the characters. The first one, this is the kind of the second year of the 3-year plan. Particular is based on the SARA Act, 3-year plan to replace the original long-term plan. And also, if we review the 3-year plan, the figure here increased the kind of rates is 6.5%. So our annual plan for the 2014 to 15 still commit 6.5%. So not any increase the percentage to give the burden to the property owner or to the ratepayer. So that's one character. Second character is the draft annual plan, we request the community board, give the feedback. That's very good, because before my understanding, community board always emphasize, why the draft annual plan not, give the community board have their say, and the feedback. So this time, I think that's very good from the community board, the point of view beforehand. The third one is the annual plan, like Councillor Johansson mentioned, this draft annual plan. Today we approve, still go to the public the consultation, especially my understanding in May. They will have the kind of the hearings of the submission, so the community, the group, or individuals still eligible to have their say regarding to this draft annual plan. The fourth character, my personal view, original we might consider during the process review all those projects, the budget, might consider to reduce, to cut some of the 7 volunteer libraries the budget, not a lot. But after the discussion, we reinstate those the budget, no any cut. This includes Red Cliff, that's the kind of east side. Maori Hall, that's the northwest, and Rickland, like the south, in the kind of the central, etc. So it's a citywide, especially after earthquake. This is part of the community, the resilience. So we keep the volunteer, the library, the budget, keep the original. I think that's the fantastic, give the community, give the people more confidence and trust in the council services. The fifth character is we reinstate the budget, 664K for the kind of a community grant. I think that's also very, very important, especially the earthquake, the community resilience. We need more care for the community to help them to achieve their goal, to provide the information, provide the service to the people. I think that's the most important. But in here, I still have a little bit concerned because this year annual plan, we compare to the 3-year plan. Even we have reduced the $9.9 million, but we still increased of the $41 million borrowing of the 3-year plan. But if I review the three main the items, one is a capital program is $1.1 billion. Second is operating the expenditure is $648,000. Last one is interest expenses. That's $59 million. So I still concerned whether the borrowing, the interest pay a little bit higher. This is my concern. But anyway, there's no any budget that is perfect. So we go to the community, the public, try to seek in their feedback. Then we have amendment to try to keep the annual plan more practical, more implementable. This is why I support this draft annual plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn Livingston.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to apologise in advance for not doing this. This has happened very fast, which is good. We're very efficient. But I do have an amendment which I don't think will be too difficult for the council to handle. I know we're going to come back and have another go at this with the community, but if I could have that on the screen, please. It's in regard to the pressure wastewater system, and I'm putting this forward not only as a measure by which the community is protected, but also the council itself. This has meant a lot to the local community. The fact that a future council could possibly take away or refuse rather to remit the electrical charge for these systems. So what I've put there is any change to this policy by future councils must adhere to the significance policy in relation to consultation. If there's anything where New Zealand councils trip up, it's over consultation. And we know there are several examples around the country where councils don't consult, they get into trouble, and it actually ends up slowing things down. So that's why I'm putting that forward, and I'll seek your support to it. It's designed to both protect residents but also the council. In other words, to prevent a future council simply moving from the floor that we will refuse to remit your electrical charge. This is in reference to page 117, and it's under remission 5, the conditions and criteria section. So I'm seeking to have that added to go out for consultation.
I'm assuming Councillor East would
Yes,
like to second the resolution. I think that's in order. It doesn't add financially to the situation, and I know that this community is looking for reassurance in terms of, future councils' behaviour in relation to the electricity charges associated with the system. Jamie Goff.
Yeah, don't want to hold anything up. Sounds quite reasonable, makes sense. I just wondered, just before we go on to moving this, just if there was any staff comment around that, or if staff had anything that they wanted to say that we should be aware of. It hardly needs a report or anything to accompany it. But
is there anyone that would be able to help us out on that?
Terry left a bit early, did he?
We might have to... Can you advise on that, Jane?
I think it looks okay, but I'm trying to see
yes, I was
Mr.
looking
Mitchell
for
at the back.
Thompson, who was there before, but
Oh. Peter Mitchell, come and join us. And actually, while you're coming down, I'll take the opportunity to introduce Bruce Mower, which I didn't do before, and sorry about that, but he's here to advise us on rating impacts of changes that we may make today. So thank you very much for being here, and I apologise for not acknowledging you before, but here is Peter Mitchell.
Well, just the councillors need to be aware you can't bind future councils.
That's right.
So, in the same way as governments can't bind future governments, other than by signing contracts with third parties. So, I think as a signal or a clear statement of intent in terms of the council's intention, it is putting a line in the sand. A future council could, of course, revoke or amend the resolution if it was passed from that perspective. But at the end of the day, in terms of the current council, that would be as far as you can go at this stage.
Well, I think that's right, and I just wonder whether the wording of it, you know, sort of almost challenges the future council, and maybe it would be better if it read that this remission policy is subject to the significance policy in relation to consultation, which means that they would have to amend that before they sought to change the policy. Without it,
I don't think that would probably achieve it. The significance policy doesn't require consultation.
right?
It essentially says the council needs to consider whether or not a matter is significant and then decide what form the consultation shall take, if any. It doesn't bind a council to consultation.
So, helping us out, a better form of wording would be that any change to this remission policy must be the subject of prior consultation with the
Local, with the affected residents.
With the affected residents before any decision is made.
Yeah. And I think that's you can then resolve that, and then a future council then need, because you then have the situation that the council then, the debate will be around changing that, if you like. And that's, I think, where you're trying to get to.
That's right. Yeah. Whereas if they did want to change it in the future, then they would have to...
Just be a simple resolution.
They would have to consult.
Yes.
Yeah, but it'd be a simple resolution if they wanted to do away with consultation, but then everyone would see that they were overturning the consultation requirement.
Yes.
Any change to this remission policy must be the subject of prior consultation with affected residents. Well, actually, not prior consultation, but just take out the word prior. Consultation with affected residents. It's A. Affected residents prior to any decision being made.
Can I just check, then that does actually, that does bind future councils to undertake that?
No, it binds them to the extent that they could amend that.
Right.
I mean, it's like the entrenchment clauses in parliamentary terms.
Okay.
Although they're entrenched to say that you need 2/3 or the result of a referendum, you can actually legally take those out without 2/3 of the vote.
Defeats the purpose.
Yeah. So it does defeat the purpose, but this is the constitutional reality that we cannot bind future councils, but I know that affected communities are really concerned about future councils making decisions. What we're saying here, and I thank you for bringing it to council's attention, is that with this policy there has to be consultation with affected residents before any decision is made. If a council wants to make the decision without consulting with the residents, then they have to repeal that clause. So that means that the first debate that they have is to take that out. But if they made a change to the policy without consulting, they would be in breach of the policy and it would not have effect. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay? I think it gives the community the assurance that this council is putting in place a protection against a future council that we can't guarantee, but that gives the best protection that we can offer. Yeah. David East.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this is a good amendment. A couple of the key issues in the pressure sewer system debate are the installation of the actual tanks on the property, and the second one is the power to these tanks. If council in the long run is of a mind to go down the pressure sewer system path, I think this resolution will in some part allay the fears of residents that a future council will be able to quickly remove that part of the remission. So I think it's a very good amendment, and I would encourage councillors to support it. Thank you.
Well, if people are happy, I'll just put this amendment and get it carried, and but then we'll come back to the debate on the whole of the. That sounded rather dictatorial of me, didn't it? But I'll put the amendment. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. So could we move on to the rest of the debate now on the annual plan? I don't know. Pauline Cotter.
Thank you. I'm agreeing with Councillor Clearwater. I'm not comfortable with reducing the community grants, and we're looking at requiring $390,000 to keep that the same. And when you look at the fact that they haven't had any increases for over 12 years, possibly 15, they've actually been decreasing anyway every year. We're an enabling council. We are a city in recovery. I believe that we are supportive of communities, and this is where our recovery begins. And I believe it's really important that this would represent roughly around 60k per ward, if you looked at it in that way. That's a considerable amount of projects that could be funded, or workers in the community, or whatever, or events. And I would be really, really reluctant to see this lost. And I also, I'm not sure how people would come and submit on that, because it's such a broad category, community funding. So it's not like you're going to get people toddling in to make a submission, and this could easily go under the radar where people are not happy with it but not get heard. So I'd like to see some way that we could fund that, and whether or not the only possibility is the Capital Endowment Fund again. I keep coming back to that, but I believe it's a rainy day and that's what it was for. So I would like to move that we consider that, please.
Phil Clearwater.
I'd like to second that.
Well, hang on. We need an amendment if that's a motion.
Okay.
I move that we consider that isn't a motion, so an amendment.
Yeah.
What we're doing at the moment, though, is the draft annual plan. So shifting money from the Capital Endowment Fund, which I'm assuming is what you're suggesting that we do, into operating expenditure. I think we made a call that we would look to the Capital Endowment Fund transfer of capital for legacy projects. But you're suggesting that a component of that be transferred for the purposes of allowing the current grant system to stay at the current amount. I mean, I'm hearing what you're saying, but I'm wondering if this is the best process for.
There could be other grants in here that could be considered legacy projects, which could be funded from the capital endowment, and then that allocation go to the community funding. It would be a juggling operation, but I'm signalling that I don't want to see community grants cut. I guess it's not my place to tell everyone where the money's coming from, but I don't want to see the rate go up.
Well, it is, because we've agreed to.
It is. Or, you know.
It is on this occasion.
So, yeah.
Oh, hang on. Look, can we just take the, if we can sort out what the actual motion is, the amendment, what the amendment is, then we will know what we're discussing. And the only thing that, I mean, I kind of wish that I'd had advance notice of this amendment so that we could either agree that it is dealt with as part of the, I mean, I think that what councillors want to say to the wider community in terms of the submissions on this, that if we're going to reduce expenditure in one area or increase expenditure in one area in this budget, we're going to find a way within the current budget to do that. So I think that's, and Councillor Cotter's certainly looking for somewhere to do that. The second thing is that she's identifying the problem around community grants, so cuts to community grants. When it's a broad brush cut across the board, who raises the public concern about how that might impact on individual organisations and how is that achieved? And is it best achieved by not having any cuts to that fund and thereby not having any input from the wider community on the subject? If you see what I mean, there is an advantage in putting the draft plan out there with the cuts in it, with a clear signal that there are many councillors around the table that want to reinstate that through means of moving things around. There is a risk around not having that out there in the public arena for discussion. But if we've come up with some wording for an amendment, then I'll take the amendment.
I just had a suggestion there, and I don't actually know if there is necessarily a resolution there. I think what Pauline's saying ultimately is that the amount of funding allocated to community grants be increased, and I think the ideal place for that is exactly the phase that we're moving into, which is a consultation. As you've said, there is a signal being sent that we're trying to be financially prudent and balance a budget to make sure that's in line with the rating increase that was signalled in the LTP. We've done that. And if something moves, something else has to move to balance that up. So as we then go into the consultation phase, I think you would be saying to the community groups, if you're uncomfortable with this, you come in and you tell council that the amount of funding to community grants be increased. It's our job then to find out how that's going to happen. But if there is a will for that, I think going into consultation is the perfect opportunity for that signal to be sent, and then we'll deal with that. I hear what you say, and I'm open to hearing how we do that.
Yeah, Phil Clearwater.
Look, I'm just wondering if there's a way of council staff finding, in fact, a way of balancing this so we keep our projected 6.45% increase and no more. And like as Pauline Cott has pointed out, previous councils have made successive cuts to this fund over many years. And it just seems to me we know that, in fact, community groups and our own community boards who we're saying we want to strengthen are going to come to us and say, look, we can't cope with this. We know already that many of the small agencies aren't coping and are starting to go under. And this is the very year, the third year after the earthquake, where in fact we as a council are going to need these organisations most. I don't think we should be expecting them to come along and put out their hands and say, please sir, we're going to need some more. I think as a council we should grasp the fact that in fact as a city we have been dependent on these small organisations, and we want to support them, and now is not the time to make cuts, and that we look in other areas where we may make reductions, and or if there's a way, as Councillor Cotter said, of taking the money from the Capital Endowment Fund in some way, or if there is still scope, and I'm not sure about, although in the supplementary report the 2.2 Section 2.2 refers to a 0.33 million increase in the capital and the Christchurch City Holdings dividend, if that still might be a way of being increased as a way of funding this.
Yeah. Okay. Ellie Jones.
Perhaps,
sorry, David East was next. Sorry.
I would just wonder if Diane might respond to that last piece too. Diane Brandish.
I think what I was asked is the CCHL dividend a source of funding to make up the 390,000, and the answer to that, of course, is that yes, potentially it is, The only caution I would give was that we were looking to have the dividend for more of the bigger issues that we know are coming through regarding the unknown factors still around Port Hills and other events. So, to be honest, really, balancing this budget is like balancing your budget at home. You can really, and we will do whatever you ask. It's just a matter of understanding what the potential downside is of using funds.
Yeah, David East.
Thank you. Look, I think we've done a fair amount of work over recent weeks in actually looking at where we can make some savings and actually come to a 6.5% rate rise. And I'd be happy for this to actually go out for consultation, and as the Mayor has said, it provides a starting point for community consultation. Having said that, I am personally quite in favour of seeing the community funding being held at its current level, but I also sort of look to the future in our 3-year planning and looking at more empowering our local communities to be able to do things themselves and adopting more of that type of approach to community projects. If in the long run, however, if we are going to stay with the current sort of balance of community funding, I would prefer to see that we chopped metropolitan funding and kept the community board fundings. If we, in the final analysis, have to stay with where we're at now, I'd rather see it come out of metropolitan community grants rather than the community boards ones. So I think we should put it out to consultation now, and at least gives, as you said before, an opportunity and a springboard for the community to consult on the plan, and also signalling that a number of councillors do have a viewpoint on reduction of community funding.
Ali Jones.
I'd endorse much of what David's just said. I think too we have to be very careful just saying in a blanket way we should keep community funding at the level it is. It's quite clear from the work that we've done in the last couple of weeks that there are a lot of community groups and there is a lot of funding. I think we need to actually look at what we're funding as well. Are there double-ups? And I think David's point about supporting communities to source their own funding outside the council is something we should look at as well. So I would agree and suggest that we put this out as is and have this discussion during the consultation period.
Glenn Livingston.
Thank you. I agree, as I think we all do, in relation to sending out a signal of financial prudence, no question there. The question for me is, but should that signal be in the form of proposed cuts to community grants? My own view is that these community groups are the glue in our city, and we need that glue to be particularly strong at the moment. So I would support our staff doing whatever they can to ensure that the grants are kept at their current level, and I do wonder how much interest is left in the capital endowment fund and how much could be applied from that as a way forward.
We've applied that 1 million was the surplus, the capital endowment fund, yes. So the 1 million that has already been applied to the payment of grants was the unapplied revenue for the year. So the answer to that is 0. Yep.
Andrew Turner.
I'm very aware of all the great work which is done by various community groups right across all of our communities, and I'm very aware of the relevance of this work at this particular time. 3 years after the earthquake, we're still very much in a recovery phase. It's those grassroots community groups in many cases that are engaging community members and keeping communities drawn together. And in fact, in many cases, it was community groups that jumped into the gap that was left immediately after the earthquake and saw communities begin to recover. I'm also very aware that the way that we do community funding at the moment may not be the best solution. I'd love to see us work through ways of making communities more sustainable, making communities able to stand on their own 2 feet a whole lot better, rather than constantly giving the same money to the same groups year after year, so that becomes an expectation and something that's relied upon. So I do agree that we need to do some work around the way that we administer community funding. I believe that's something that we should be looking at in terms of our long-term plan discussions. I don't think simply making a cut to the level of community funding at the moment, at this particularly important moment, is the way to go. I certainly would support leaving community funding at its current level, if that's workable in terms of the budget in this annual plan, and then have a complete look at the way that we deal with community funding in the longer term as part of the long-term plan discussions.
Are there any other comments here? Jani Johansson.
I guess it was my expectation that we would have more flexibility around CDC and CCT, given the they're inflation-adjusted grants, so every year they get more money. The cuts that they're finding is really a little more than inflation. So they're actually getting the same amount that they're getting rather than less, and we're taking money off community grants in real terms that is not inflation adjusted. I have a real issue with that. I do, however, want to make the point that actually the previous council, and I think this council, although there's a proposal around the reduction to community grants, and I don't support that actually we have been incredibly generous. We spent huge amounts of the interest from the Capital Endowment Fund into physical facilities and local communities. We have been funding things through our betterment, improvement and infrastructure allowance to replace the physical community facilities like the Gaiety. So I think this council should be proud of its investment it has made into local communities post-earthquake at a time when our finances have been increasingly constrained. But I do have a lot of sympathy for the arguments that have been put forward, and again I think there needs to be a clear steer today around the possibility of what we can do to look at, I think, a better readjustment of the 6.5 increase in relation to community funding. Now, I don't know how we get staff to look at the CDC, CCT, endowment fund stuff. It was my hope that some of the endowment funding was actually going to be able to go to communities, but I guess with a more sizable, substantial grant for new, innovative, creative projects that might come up.
Legacy projects.
Legacy, or in fact even the events seeding fund, for example. So, I'm not sure we're talking about a big quantum of difference, but I do think there's some principles around it that we do need to look at. I certainly do not support us reducing community board funding at all. Interesting to note that lately community boards have been asked to pick up metropolitan funding because there's no money. So we're being asked to fund as community boards metropolitan campaigns across the city, which seems really bizarre given the local focus that community boards should have. So there's clearly a gap in the community funding that's been made available.
I'd like to comment on this because one of the difficulties that I see is that we haven't actually had a strategic review of the grant system. And the final comment that Councillor Johansson just made really re-emphasises it, because 2 community boards have been approached about a project which is really a metropolitan project, but the Metro Fund is open now for the next financial year, and it's a single process for the entire year ahead. Well, that project that is seeking funding now wasn't thought of a year ahead, so wasn't able to be dealt with in that context. It's only tell me the name of the grant that exists after July? The discretionary fund?
Through community boards or?
No.
Metropolitan grants.
Metropolitan grants opens and closes. So it's open at the moment, it closes, and then it's for the rest of the next financial year.
But there's also a discretionary Metro grants fund as well.
Yes, that's right. And it's that one there that I didn't even know that particular organisation had applied to it. It has a certain amount left in it, but I don't know how much the particular group was asking for. So, I've had a briefing on this today, and because I've been concerned about this whole question, because there are a number of grants all in different funds, and the interrelationship between them isn't clear. And it does look as if this discretionary fund was established so that those organisations that didn't meet the year out sort of or several months ahead of for a full year, that they didn't have a really so it was developed for that purpose of meeting those that can't meet the requirements of the Metro Fund. Then we've also got a number of other funds. So, and I mean, myself as mayor, I have a small discretionary fund that I'm able to use. As I indicated before, the mayoral welfare fund, which really ought to be a civic wellbeing fund, actually needs to pick up that discretionary fund, but be nimble enough so that it doesn't have to hold things up that need an urgent input of cash just to resolve such situations. It does appear to me that as a city, we need to have a mechanism for providing a sense of reciprocity when we've received so much from other countries. Some of our own residents come originally from countries that experience disaster, yet we have no fund that we can draw on that's not ratepayer funded in order to assist someone overseas. And I would like to establish part of the grant system to address that as well. So I actually, I'm thinking this morning that looking at the whole community grants and the fact that the current level of funding at 7.2 million, I can't say that that's actually necessarily meeting the best need, the best that our community could get from the investment or the relationship or the co-funding relationship that we have with a community. And that's what I really want to see us move to as we debate what a resilient city looks like, is that the council doesn't fund an organisation. They work in partnership with organisations to get the best of them. There are only 8 organisations that have a 3-year funding relationship with the council. And how they get to be those 8 organisations, whereas others apply every single year and have an expectation of ongoing funding. I can't tell you how those 8 were chosen over and above all of the others that actually look like they should have a set funding stream from the council. So what I would prefer to see out of this process that we're going through now is a review of the whole of our grants and a strategic analysis of what that might mean in terms of how we get the community engaged in its own, sense of itself and its relationship with us as a council. So, I can't tell the ratepayers of Christchurch that $7.2 million is necessarily producing, stronger, more resilient communities in the way that I believe that it could with some rejigging. So in a way, it almost, whether the motion is that we retain the grants level at this level and then we have a review within the context of this review period, because by the time it comes back to council after consultation will be sufficient time to get that report done, and we could have a full analysis of our whole community grant system. So in a way, So the only disadvantage with the amendment that I can see for me is that it doesn't require us to find the savings internally within the budget, because that in itself would have a 0.12% increase in rates. So we would want to find, so that for me, I would want to see that community grants remain at the current level of 7.2 million, with a, the cost of which is met within the budget as it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Add to Leanne that not all of that 7.2 million goes to community groups. A lot of it, through the discretionary, will be community boards paying for something like a seat or a bus stop or I don't know what else, Phil, but it's not all going directly to the little people, if you like. So, and everyone who applies for that fund needs to bring in a full evaluation, and that the success of that program is generally measured by staff. So it's very strict. That fund is very strict. So I would support your addition to my amendment.
That's news to me. So is that right? That
sometimes community boards will access
the community board's funding is not just used for community groups, it's used for community facilities and...
Yes,
things like communications for community boards having awards. Our board lately was asked to fund a toilet, a public toilet. So there's some very local core things that council do
through
that
the $60,000
boards are having to pick up. It's been increasing.
All right.
Through the board's discretionary response fund, they can fund, there's no restrictions as to what they can fund as long as it's not contrary to council policy.
Right.
And not funding an appeal, a legal challenge to something that council has moved as well. So there is a lot of latitude for boards to be able to fund public works.
Okay. So, but are we able, between the mover and seconder, to find some wording that looks for the internal, the savings to match that in the budget?
But you have to tell us where we're going to find
Do we?
Liam, would it be something along the lines subject to cost savings being found?
No, I'm told that that's not good enough. We actually have to find where. Yeah.
We have spent weeks going over this stuff. We have a budget to pass. Let's get on with it and wait for the consultation process. And if people come and ask for that, we'll deal with it then. This is a complete waste of time.
I couldn't support this because there's no corresponding, we haven't identified a corresponding 390,000, although I support the intent of it. As I said before, I think it's, we put the draft out as it is now. We signal a strong message that there are councillors that would like to see the community funding retained at its current level, but to achieve that will require corresponding cuts from other parts of the budget. So I'm happy for the draft to go out as it is with that signal.
Phil?
I thought we had, although it's been long discussed, I guess people were looking very hard at cost savings, and as we've indicated to staff, if there's a way, for example, of the Capital Endowment Fund or the CCHL dividend, if there's a way of that actually affording this or some of the other projects, we ask staff to find those. And I certainly support the concept, and this will be an addition to this amendment, and along the lines that you, Leanne, have referred to. And
but I've been told that isn't sufficient. We actually have to find it in the budget before it goes out. Right. So we would have to do that now. We have to allocate where the money's coming from. But the point is that, I mean, I'm getting a sense that, you know, that it might be better that I put the resolution as it is. If it's voted up, then we have to find a place in the budget for it. If it's voted down, then we can move on with the very strong signal that councillors that are going to vote against this resolution have said that in the process they want to find to reinstate. And I guess the commitment that I've made is that we will report on a full analysis of our whole grant system right across the $7.2 million so that we can actually analyse what we can do in a much more strategic way than I think that we're doing at the moment.